The good news is a couple of parts have arrived for the E92 M3 rebuild project, so we can start that today. The bad news, however, is I keep finding things wrong with the car. I sort of feel like the more layers that we peel back, the more problems we find. So if you're new to the channel, this is my 2008 E92 M3 that I just bought a few days ago. I found out it has a lot of things wrong with it. Well, at least a lot more than I thought would be wrong with it. But we're gonna do our best to bring this thing back to life and give it another chance. I'm still waiting on some of the bigger items to arrive for this car so we can really start diving into the project. But there are some simple DIY things that we are gonna try and tackle today. As I dive deeper into the E92 project, I'm finding more and more problems, which can be expected on a 2008 M3 that was tracked and has 92,000 miles on the odometer. I can't really say that I'm shocked. Now, if you guys remember in the project reveal video of this 2008 M3, I found out that the brakes were in really bad condition. I was really hoping that it would have been a simple fix, as easy as just re-bleeding the brakes, maybe changing out the pads, and even upgrading the lines. But I found out that it's actually much worse than that. So yesterday I stopped by to see my friends over at CES Motorsport, threw the car back up on the lift, and took a look at the brakes. Unfortunately, one of my fears were confirmed. The calipers are no good. You can actually see that the rear brake pads are no longer making complete contact with the rear rotors. More than likely, there is something internally wrong with the brake pistons themselves. We have to keep in mind that this car was heavily tracked throughout its life. It does have 92,000 miles and it is from 2008. More than likely, this M3 was driven a whole lot more than it was actually maintained. And I'm starting to discover a lot of the wearable items are just at the point of failure. Luckily for me, I have a fantastic relationship with the guys over at Straight Six Auto Group, and they had a complete set of E9X M3 brake calipers for this car, so we went ahead and picked those up. In addition to that, I've gone ahead and ordered all OEM rotors, upgraded stainless steel brake lines, and ceramic pads on all four corners. In addition to restoring all of the brake components on my E92 M3, we are also going to tackle the wheel bearings. In the previous video, I also spoke a little bit about the headlights and how they were in rough condition. You can see there's a lot of hazing, pitting, scratches, and these have just seen better days. But I know for a fact that I can restore these and bring them back. On this side, I did a very light polish and they already look a ton better. So it was time to bring these headlights back to life. In order to do so, I started off wet sanding with an 800 grit sandpaper, and then I went into a 1000 grit sandpaper, and then lastly, I finished it off with a 2000 grit sandpaper. Now, when going through the wet sanding procedure on these headlights, I really took my time. I didn't want to rush it. The 800 grit is going to remove the majority of the pitting, as well as that oxidization and yellowing. You can even see the milky substance coming off of the headlights. That is just that old discolored plastic being sanded away. After I finished sanding, it was time to start polishing these headlights. I started out with a cutting pad and a little bit of compound that's a bit more abrasive before finally finishing with a finisher pad that's really going to give it that clear look and make these headlights as smooth as possible. And just take a look at the difference here. These are so much better. You guys can knock this out at home on your own headlights, and it shouldn't take you longer than 30 minutes to an hour to complete both headlights. I'm really happy with the way that these turned out so far, but when we go to paint, I'll actually remove the entire headlight assembly so I can get a little bit deeper around the edges and just make sure that the entire lens is as clear as possible. Now just remember guys, on this particular car, I'm having the entire front clip repainted. So if you're already happy with the paint on your car, I would definitely be diligent about taping as much off as possible on the edges so you don't damage the paint when you are sanding or polishing. There's still a little bit of minor pitting, but compared to what they were before, these look incredible. The rings in these headlights are also quite dull and they are very yellow. My friends over at ECS Tuning sent out these upgraded angel eye bulbs, and if you look here, they're actually LED, so these should be a lot brighter. The light color is actually 6000K, which should be a nice pure white for this E92. Those are actually the exact same bulbs that I ran on my E90 M3, and I thought they turned out really good. These bulbs are pretty easy to install. It can just be a really tight fit behind the actual light bulb assembly. In order to get the actual bulb into the back of the headlight, it only fits in one way and you only have so much room. So you really just have to be patient and take your time with it. These are also plug and play, which make everything so much easier. On my right side headlight, you can actually see that the previous light bulb was never installed correctly. It's actually sitting lopsided in the housing. So it's a good thing that we caught that and that we're changing them out. In my opinion, these look so much better. They really tie in the front end of this car, and the rings themselves are so much more vivid and visible. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I'll have them linked down below for you guys. In the last video, I also pointed out how all of the window tint had these little 3M stamps all over them. I thought that was really strange. However, you guys caught that, and you let me know that the actual 3M stamps seem to be just ink. So I used a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, a rag, and they came right off. If that was the only problem with this window tint, I would probably keep it on the car. However, it's pretty old and it looks pretty bad. Some of the tint itself is starting to peel and bubble, and it also looks like the tint is taking on this purplish hue. So unfortunately, that means that the window tint is gonna have to go. If I wanted to keep it on this car, I would probably just have it redone with a much nicer ceramic tint. The morning after I purchased this car and I came out to the garage, it actually wouldn't even unlock. I thought that maybe the battery in the remote was dying. After numerous attempts of unlocking the car, I finally got inside and I was able to start the car. However, it had a really rough time starting. And then I noticed every time that I turned off the car and then started it back up, the date and time would not actually stay set in the instrument cluster. So after a little bit of research, I realized that the battery in this car is probably no longer good. Not only was the battery that was in the car at the time only putting out 8 volts of power, but it was also the incorrect battery for this car. It was an H6 battery, which is actually a lot smaller than the battery that has to be in this car. So yesterday I stopped by Advance Auto Part, picked up the correct battery for this car, hopped over to CES Motorsport, and while I was checking the brakes, I also replaced the battery and registered it to this car. With the correct battery, I noticed right away that everything was operating better. Even the lights were much brighter, the car would start faster. If there's one thing that I've learned about these BMWs, especially the older ones, incorrect or even old batteries in these cars can end up creating a lot more issues down the road, and in general just create a lot of inconsistencies with the car. So it's a good thing that I got that sorted right off the bat. Now, while I was looking at all the gaps on the car and everything that I thought was just a little bit misaligned, one thing I noticed right away were the mirrors. These seem to be pretty far off. I wasn't quite sure if something was actually broken inside. After a little bit of research though, this is a pretty easy fix. On the driver's side, you can see that it is really far off and it just looks pretty terrible. The passenger side isn't as bad, but it's still a little bit off. So what we're gonna do is actually take the mirror and fold it all the way back on both sides. Same deal over here. Fold it all the way back. And now what we're gonna do is hop in the car and fold mirrors all the way back to return position. Hopefully what the car is doing is realigning the mirrors so it knows exactly how far it needs to go back and snap into place to where it's aligned again. So what we'll do now is open it back up, hit the folding mirror button one more time. So here's the driver's side. This looks a lot better. It's not 100% perfect, but it's really, really close. And here you guys can see the passenger side. Same story. It's really good, but it's not 100% perfect. But from how misaligned those mirrors actually were before, this is much better and I can live with it. One of the other easier fixes on this car that was bothering me from the beginning were the infamous cup holders. This one seems to work just fine, but this one, no dice. It could be that the spring is just misaligned or broken, or it could be that something else inside of here is damaged, but we won't know until we pop it off. So let's go ahead and remove this trim and then we can get inside of here and see what is actually going on. So the way that these work is you actually have a little spring right here, and this spring mechanism sits right over here, and the pressure of this spring pushes the actual cup holder itself out of the dashboard. Unfortunately, in our situation, the spring is damaged as well as the internal parts where the spring latches onto. We're also missing one of the plastic clips right here. In some cases, you're able to salvage this by bending these little tabs out and making them hook onto the plastic. Unfortunately, our spring is toast. Unfortunately, we get to spend the $50 or $60 for the OEM part from BMW. In some cases, you get lucky and you can salvage these. And as you learned today, sometimes you can't. All right, Alright guys, so that is going to wrap up today's video. I hope you guys are enjoying the E92 M3 project as much as I am. It feels really good to be back in that V8, that S65. However, right now this car really cannot be driven too much because the suspension is really bad, the brakes are absolutely terrible, and it's honestly just downright dangerous to be driving this thing on the road. I'm hoping that some of the bigger maintenance items will come in soon and we can tackle those ASAP so we can get this thing back out in the streets. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching the videos. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.